Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1977 surrealist horror film Eraserhead. Now, this is the start of what would go on to become a very weird, unique, and wonderful career for the film's director, David Lynch. But it's also a film that I've never really been that big of a fan of. It's a movie that I definitely do appreciate on a certain level. There are elements of it that I do enjoy and I do like, but as a whole, it's honestly not for me. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Eraserhead, I would like to give a special shout out to Dawn for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I'll try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Eraserhead is a film that is directed by David Lynch, written by David Lynch, produced by David Lynch, edited by David Lynch, features some music by David Lynch as well as other people. This, in a lot of ways, is very much David Lynch's movie in a multitude of different ways. And it was quite the undertaking. It was a film that took, I think, at least 5 years to complete. And the attention to detail, the passion for the film is definitely evident when it comes to the film's visuals and the direction. Even though this is not a film that I personally am a significant champion of when it comes to the entirety of it, I have to admit Lynch's direction in this is genuinely fantastic. It creates a very strong and unsettling and surreal and strange, nightmarish tone and atmosphere. It showcases numerous different shots that are honestly technically incredible for a first time filmmaker, with the extreme zooms of weird objects or weird creatures, the pans that are utilized throughout the film, the tracking shots, the multitude of wide shots. This is a film that definitely features some really impressive and genuinely tremendous filmmaking. So this is a feat in that regard, especially when it comes to the fact that this is a film that was made for a really low budget. So it's a film that shows how valuable a talented filmmaker can be when it comes to a overall production, and how if you have the right filmmaker with the right vision, you don't have to have a massive budget in order for a film to look great. And Eraserhead is honestly a very striking film visually, and it features arguably some of the best and most unique direction of the entire decade of the 1970s. So this is definitely, in my opinion, a film that is very successful when it comes to the direction by David Lynch. Now, when it comes to the screenplay by David Lynch, that's where things, in my opinion, start to go awry, and the quality of the film starts to dip. Now, I know that Lynch himself and other people have mentioned that this is a screenplay that is intentionally a placeholder for weird and trippy visuals, and other than some subtext, that's really all that the script represents. And I understand that. I get it. This is very much an art piece instead of a traditional film when it comes to plot structure, characterization, and so on and so forth. But I can't sit here and lie and say that I don't prefer a more traditional script structure for my cinematic uh, uh, experiences. Like I can appreciate the film when it comes to its atmosphere and its mood and its visuals and its style, but to me, a lot of that rings very hollow, doesn't have much impact beyond, oh, that's interesting, or that looked cool, or that was weird, because there really isn't anything to connect with. There's no characters you really connect with on a deeper level because you barely get to know anybody. There's no plot honestly to speak of other than some vague thing about this guy named Henry who meets a girl and they have a kid and he doesn't want the kid and he deals with a lot of fear and anxiety relating to the kid who also happens to be some kind of worm or sperm monster, and he has hallucinations dreams throughout his whole time trying to take care of this sperm baby, and then eventually decides to kill it, and then winds up with some lady in a radiator in heaven, and then everything fades to white. There really is not much at all when it comes to a consistent plot or a driving force when it comes to the screenplay, other than just the bare minimum. And I understand that that is something that is done by design. That is something that Lynch did on purpose. He intentionally made things very vague and scatterbrained and chaotic and strange because he was really focusing more upon the visuals. And I think for some people, this style over substance is something that really works for them. For me, as good as the style is, as unique as the style is throughout this film, it doesn't resonate very strongly with me because I never really got that invested in the story because there really wasn't much of a story. I didn't really get that invested in the characters because there really wasn't much at all in terms of characterization. The dialogue at points is definitely something that's very unnerving and unsettling on more than one occasion. Definitely makes you go, "What the hell?" But it's not really what I would consider to be that memorable or honestly even that thought provoking. So it's one of those movies where it's got some moments, some vignettes when it comes to this script that I think are effective, but then it's got a lot of other things about it that I just don't really feel were that well fleshed out, whether it was on purpose or whether they just weren't handled as well as they could be, or maybe it's a bit of both. Either way, it's a screenplay to me that is just really not that good. But it's also a script that isn't really trying to be a traditional type of screenplay when it comes to plot structure, characterization, dialogue, or any of those things. And it is effective when it comes to its subtext about parenthood, about the anxieties and the fears associated with becoming a parent. So I will give Lynch a lot of credit for that. But with a lot of the other things about it, the weird dinner table sequences with chicken that are alive or not, or dead and alive at the same time and bleeding, or the sperm creatures, a planet with a guy in it who's operating some kind of levers, the whole nightmare scene where Henry's head pops off and the sperm baby takes its place, and then his head falls out a window, and then somebody finds it and then brings it to a pencil shop, and then his head is turned into erasers, and that's where the Eraserhead term, that's where the title of the movie comes from, and then he literally becomes pencil eraser fuzz. It's one of those things where I can definitely see the building blocks and the skeleton and the outline of something, but it's never really fully completed by the end. And it's just not very satisfying to me. I prefer a more traditional story arc, a more traditional and more engaging series of characterization, and that's what I personally prefer when it comes to my screenplays. The visuals are nice. They definitely are something that's quite strong when it comes to this movie. It leaves at least a bit of an impression just because of the strength of the visuals alone. But I feel they could have been even stronger and could have left even more of an impact if you had a better plot. You had actual characters that you could connect with or relate to or root for or even despise. There just really isn't much emotion that you can really attach to almost honestly anything in this film because it's just such a base level when it comes to its storytelling and other aspects of writing a script. But that's just me personally. I know a lot of people are going to disagree because of the fact that it's got subtext and social commentary about industrialism and some of these other things that it touches upon, and the fact that it's not intended to be a traditional way of telling a story. But to me, this works as a short film and not as a feature film if you don't have much of a plot and you don't have much when it comes to characterization. The visuals can only carry something so far. Now, the cast, I think for what little they have to work with, they do some good work, especially Jack Nance. Jack Nance is Harry Spencer with his frizzed out hair and uh, his just really impressive way of showing the character's anxiety and fear without saying a single word is something that I feel is definitely noteworthy, definitely worthy of praise. Um, the rest of the cast, I mean, Charlotte Stewart is Mary X, Alan Joseph is Mr. X, Jeanne Bates as Mrs. X, Jean Lang is the grandmother, Judith Anna Roberts as the beautiful girl across the hall, uh, Laurel Near is the lady in the radiator, Jack Fisk is the man in the planet, Darwin Jostin is as Paul, T Max Graham is the boss, Hal Landon Jr. is a pencil machine operator. The rest of the cast, they're fine. They definitely do add to the whole surrealistic and very strange nature of the film. They definitely do fit the movie well when it comes to adding an extra bit of weirdness to everything. But there's really not much when it comes to their characters. There's not much for these actors to really work with when it comes to dialogue or really anything else other than just looking weird and acting in an off kilter fashion. That's really about it. Um, but I will have to admit that I do feel that Jack Nance was great. And he's a big part of why, at the very least, I find this film to be okay, along with David Lynch's direction and some of the other aspects of the overall production. Uh, Yeah, I mean, for somebody who doesn't have a ton of dialogue, who doesn't really have much in terms of depth for his character, other than he's a father who's anxious and fearful of having a kid and the responsibility of that, I think he really does exemplify those feelings in a very effective and very believable fashion, despite the fact that this is a movie that is just very off the wall and oddball in nature. Now, the cinematography by Frederick Elms and Herbert Cardwell, I felt was honestly quite impressive. I think both of them did an amazing job. Really did fit well with Vision's vision for the film, and created some very incredible pieces of imagery. The editing by David Lynch, I also felt was great. There's a lot of moments in this film that are able to get under your skin and unnerve you in a large part due to how they're edited, especially some of the transitions that are utilized throughout the film. And the music by Lynch, Fats Waller, and Peter Ivers, I definitely felt fit the film very well. It's another thing that helped emphasize and add to the overall weird and kooky and unnatural atmosphere and mood of the film. This is a score, though, that for me personally doesn't really feature any memorable notes other than the song that the lady in the radiator sings in heaven. But other than that, like it's a lot of just noise and weird sounds and the kind of stuff that wasn't really the norm back in 1974. I mean, or 1977. And 1974 was kind of around, definitely still around the time when he was making this movie because it took like 5 years to finish the film. But in 1977, this really wasn't something that was very common, and it would become something that was more prevalent in other experimental films, other films in general, and the score was definitely ahead of its time in that regard. So I could see why the movie is considered to be culturally or cinematically important in that regard, but I've never really been a massive fan of that type of music and that type of score for films anyway. So if I was really big on that, then this would be like a big deal. But I'm not. So the fact that this was such a ahead of its time kind of score because of the fact that it had those kind of elements in it that are utilized in a lot of horror films today and other films, uh, that doesn't really connect with me as strongly as it might for other people because I honestly don't like that. It works for this movie, but it's still not something that I feel is really that memorable or particularly that dynamic when it comes to the music. The rest of the film, in my opinion, definitely features some other effective aspects of the production, the art direction, the production design, the stop motion effects that are utilized at points, the little bits of makeup effects like the severed head, the worm or sperm baby, which apparently was made with, I guess, a combination of a dead rabbit, and a lamb fetus. And yeah, that is, I think that definitely tracks because it doesn't really look like something that was made with latex or rubber. It's got this very meaty and a real texture to it, and it definitely adds to the unsettling nature of the movie for sure. I when I first saw that thing, I did a double take, and I was like, "What the fuck is that thing?" So I would say, yeah, they did a great job with that. That's definitely thinking outside of the box. That's definitely utilizing your low budget in a very effective fashion. Oh, hey, don't have the money for a really elaborate puppet effect here. Let's just do something with actual dead animals that we can find somewhere at a butcher shop or somewhere else, like an embalmed lamb fetus that we got for some weird a guy who works at some oddity shop or something. Like there's a lot of stuff about it that is very odd, but it's very fitting for such an odd film. And it's another element of Eraserhead that definitely does make it unique and makes it stand out. And in a lot of ways, the cheap nature of some of the other effects, like the different sperm worm creatures, the big giant version of the baby sperm, which is just this plaster head, or the look of the lady in the radiator with her chubby plaster cheeks. It just actually is something that adds to the overall aesthetic of the film instead of detracting from it. So it's one of those weird instances where the production cuts corners because of the low budget, but it actually winds up benefiting the film in the end. So this is not, in my opinion, Lynch's finest work. I don't think this is his peak as a filmmaker or even as a writer. I know there's people who agree to disagree. For a lot of people, Racerhead is their pick for Lynch's best film. To me, it's one of his weaker films, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have its merits. And I think it's a bad movie. It's a film that I just like. All right, at the end of the day, for its strong visuals and for other aspects of the production and for Jack Nance's minimalist but uh, genuinely impressive performance. But beyond those things, there's not much about this film that really connects with me. So it's not a film that I really have a desire to watch again anytime soon. And it's not a film I watch that often because like I said, I just don't really think the script is that well polished, that well thought out, whether it was by design or not. It ultimately turns into something that's kind of dull, kind of boring to watch because there's not really much of a driving force for anything. And there's not really a reason to care about any of these characters. And it's got attempts at satire, but they're not really that funny most of the time. I've read that some people say it's supposed to be a comedy, but I never laughed a single time while watching this, and I like dark comedies. I don't really see the place or the point where there's a joke or there's something that is actually funny. Maybe you laugh because you're uncomfortable, but I don't think that's actually an example of it being a comedy. So that could have been something that could have helped the script and helped the film overall. Maybe a little bit funnier dialogue or something about it that was actually genuinely funny and witty. But you don't really get that. So this is just style over substance. There's just a ton of style, a ton of weirdness, and a lot of surrealistic imagery. And if that's enough for you, then this might be something that you really enjoy and you really get into. But if that isn't enough for a considerable or worthwhile film, then I think this is a film that's going to be kind of hard for other people to sit through or other people to get that engaged with as a whole. So this is the epitome of an acquired taste kind of movie. There are people who love it. Uh, there are people who hate it. I'm not one of those people. Uh, and there's also people who are just kind of indifferent on it. And I'm closer to that uh, um, realm or that part of the spectrum than anything else. It's like, yeah, it's fine for what it is, but it's not one of my favorites. But anyway, thanks for watching my thoughts on Eraserhead. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.